You guys ever just looked in your pocket at your keys? I bet you that you all actually have one key. Probably the same key that your mom gave you when you were in second grade. She like tied it around a shoestring and made you wear it around your neck. Right? You know that key, right? That's the key to your house. Is that about what that key means to you? I mean, really, what does this key mean to you? What happens if you didn't have this key? I mean, this is the place you go to tuck your kids in at bed at night, right? This is where you go to talk to your spouse over dinner. This is where you go to close the door when the day has been so tough and you just need to be where you are. It's your security, it's your safety. For 1.3 million families, public housing is this key. But who are these families, right? In El Paso, the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso houses 6% of the total population. 40,000 people call the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso home. And to just get through the door, your entrance is being poor. But poor means something different in different areas of the country. So let me define what it means here. Poor here means if you have a family of 4, you probably don't make over $12,000 a year. So you probably don't own a car. You probably have challenges getting to work in the morning. That key and that opportunity is limited to where you live. Like that. It's black and white, but that's not an old picture. That's now. You can walk down not more than half a mile from here and see those exact buildings. That was built in 1940. Those are the same buildings that they live in today. Back when you had an urban core that was where actually the manufacturing happened and opportunity was. But the cities grew up. The cities changed. The cities moved on, but public housing didn't. Public housing stayed exactly the same in exactly the same location, regardless of the needs of the people who were trying to change. You see, we asked them to change. As a taxpayer, we go, hey, you know what? This is a government assistance. Use it for a while and move on. But how do you move on when you're living in one of the poorest zip codes in the country, of which El Paso has 2? You don't have a car, and the opportunity that you're given really limits the amount of money that you can earn. And you can almost determine the success of a family or a child based on the zip code that they're born into and grow up in. Now, it all seems pretty bleak, right? I mean, you hear this and it's horrible and you think about the problems and everything else. But actually, I think the future is actually very bright. You see, El Paso is changing the very paradigm and the business model of what public housing is. And we believe it's a model that can change public housing really across the whole United States. And it's not just necessarily the location that's the problem. But you got to realize there's only 1.3 million housing units in the country, and you can't build any more. In 1974, they stopped allowing housing authorities to increase the number of units, even though the population of the United States has changed. El Paso is not the same size it was in 1974. So if you think about the limitation of size and now your limitation of the money, you realize that the families that use the public housing key to call home, we're closing 10,000 of them every single year. 10,000 families that could call public housing a home, we're taking these keys and we're putting them in a desk drawer and we're closing it. And we board up the window because it's not safe. You see, every housing authority's got a mission, and it goes like this. We provide safe, clean, affordable, decent housing for 80% or lower of adjusted median income. If it's not safe, you can't let them live there. But if they can't live there, where do they live? And so it's with that we really tried to rethink kind of what we're doing and think of the opportunities and the families and the change. And how do you rethink something that's 80 years old and is broken? Because if you need a hammer and they're forcing you to buy paper clips, or you need to pay for people, and they're telling you, I'm sorry, you can only pay for utilities. How do you change a system that is so rooted in this regulation that if you step outside of it, you get hurt? You hurt the families that you're there to help. How is it that you fix stuff if you can't even have reserves like a normal apartment complex or building would? Because you know that the windows are going to fail, the roof's going to go, but if you have money sitting in a bank account, it means you don't need that money. And they're going to take it away from you. How do you plan for the future when you don't even know what the budget is going to be in the next year? The government shutdowns, or well, you need this much money, but we're going to give you 85% of that. Let's see what you can do. So we started thinking. We started saying, hey, you know what? There's something else we can do. And if you know what, we're going to think through this. You can't hire the same people that created the public housing, the bureaucrats. You got to think and hire people that came from private business. You have to listen to people that understand market forces and changes, because we understand regulation and compliance. And so one aspect of innovation that we did do, one thing that we did to start making a difference, is we said, hey, how about if we just think about how we build it? We built the most energy efficient public housing ever built in the United States. Not only that, we built the most energy efficient housing, multifamily, ever built in the United States, in a place called El Diablo. A place that was at one time 30 years ago one of the most dangerous areas of the city. There was a place that was public housing, right across from the zoo, right on an international border. And in that location, when we got TARP money, we decided, after going through a lot of building that was exactly the same, that we could rethink what it could be. And so we went out and we advertised in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, in the Seattle Express News, in the Los Angeles Times, looking for the greatest minds in the United States to build the most amazing facility for the elderly that this United States had ever seen. Now, I understood energy efficiency. I said, hey, you know, let's do something green. But I didn't know what green was. I knew a concept. And normally you rank green in like platinum LEED or gold LEED or silver LEED, and that's the scale that you have, right? That's the maximum, platinum being the best. And these architects came back in a design competition, something that again had never been done. We asked them to compete against the other people in the world, with competition coming in from Europe and all the way from New Zealand. The biggest architectural firms in the United States and little architecture firms that were built just for this competition. And they came up with a concept, the one that won, the one that you see behind me, with an idea of net zero. And what that is that means every bit of electricity you needed on site is created on site. The only utility that you're lacking in this location is water. There's not fossil fuels going into this. There's not a gas line at all. Everything is electric. Air conditioning, heating, water, lights. And if you model this right now, it costs $8 a year in utilities. That's 35 times more energy efficient than the highest level of energy efficiency under the LEED scale. And it wasn't just energy efficiency. It was like, how do you build it for the people that are going to live there? How do you think of the elderly? Because what we do right now in the units that we have, the bathroom is upstairs and the kitchen is downstairs. And as you age in place, you have to move them away from their friends and family and their support network. You know, it's kind of hard for an 85-year-old lady to meet new friends when she's in a wheelchair and you just ripped her away from her support network or her family that lives in the community where she's at. They degrade so quickly. So every single one of the units in here is ADA. Every single one is adjustable depending upon the needs that you receive as you age in place. Every single unit is accessible by anybody else if you can get on an elevator or walk from unit to unit. Every single one of these units is connected by similar floors, even though they're different buildings in its exterior. We tried to think of it from them, from their side, what they need. And that's what we're trying to do here. That's the change that we're trying to make. It's not trying to say, hey, listen, public housing is horrible. It's public housing hasn't changed. The world has gone up and ran away, and we stayed in the same location. So then something else happened. As we realized that our units were degrading and we had these challenges, a new experiment happened in the United States. The United States government offered 60,000 units called RAD, R-A-D, Rental Assistance Demonstration. Now for me that meant radical. For me that meant just something incredible, and radical change is what kind of came to mind as I think about it. Because what that was the ability for us to own the units. See, up until today, we were nothing more than a management company. We may be able to touch the building, but I couldn't do anything with those buildings, and the team at the Housing Authority couldn't do anything without asking Mother May I from the federal government. We also couldn't guarantee cash flow from year to year, like I mentioned before. And what this did really was change that entire business. And it says, Housing Authority, you're always going to be government, but can you run like a private company? If we give you money like a private company or asset like a private company, can you do something more with it? So the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso took 11% of the national allocation of those RAD units. And we said, you know what? We're done with public housing. We're going to transform 6,400 units or the houses for 20,000 people and make them into something that can grow up with El Paso. We now have a guaranteed cash flow for the next 40 years. We've been able to actually, because we own the units, take a mortgage on them, just like you would on your house. Banks want to line up to give us money because we have guaranteed money and they know we can pay it back. And we've raised over $1.3 billion for investment here in El Paso, without one penny of it coming from the taxpayers. Think about that. You just took all of public housing in El Paso. You just took all the public housing for 3% of the total population right now, and you're going to do something with it with money that not only is private going to make money, but the Housing Authority is going to have a guaranteed cash flow that when it also does it well and efficiently, can then create more. See, Senator Faircloth said we can't build anymore, right? But if we figure out new ways to create access to capital, we can. Now, this thought of who we're trying to help and this idea of change doesn't just stop with cash flow or business models or building new green units. But think about it. If the biases that you have, that you came in with public housing, because I know when I said, what do you think of public housing? You probably thought crime, blight, right? All those things that are negative. But what if in the next 20 years, when I mention public housing, you can't even point to a location where it is? What happens if public housing is all over that the opportunities are? What happens if public housing can move in the city depending upon where the need for the jobs are? What happens if public housing can move in the nation depending upon the migration patterns of people? I mean, if you look at the migration right now, what's happening in the United States, it's all moving south to the Dallases of the world and the Austins and the Atlantas. But you know what? There's lots of people in Detroit. And how do you move if you don't even have enough money to pay for the down payment on a rent? If you can't afford a car, how do you get on a bus to go chase that next job or that rest of that opportunity? Why can't you have an Airbnb for affordable housing? And that's where I think this whole thing ends up in the end. And I think that this first step that the Housing Authority for the City of El Paso is doing is radical in and of itself. We will have transformed public housing in El Paso. But as more get transformed across the nation. As more housing authorities and more cities get on board, they too can think differently. And you can create cooperation and synergies. You can outthink the issues by tapping into resources that you have within business. You can create additional revenue sources to create opportunity without being a burden upon the taxpayers. You can tackle the blight and the crime issues, and you can change the way that the United States of America and that the people overall think about housing as it is, and see it as an opportunity for people. See it as the change that they're happy to know exists. To be that little engine that could in government that puts a smile on your face. To be the key to not only transforming the lives of the families that you're moving, but also transforming entire communities. We believe that that is happening today in El Paso. And we believe that the future is really bright. Thank you.